Hello and welcome to the Magic the Gathering tutorial. Since I've been making these videos, I thought, well, what if people don't know how to play Magic? So I'll just play through a game and explain what's happening as it goes down in pretty good detail. And I'll explain the ins and outs of the game, and hopefully you can learn how to play Magic, and maybe you'll even want to buy the game after this video. After I make the tutorial, if you already know how to play Magic, then I will just make the series as normal. This is a standalone video. For the tutorial, I think I will play this deck, the Chandra deck, because it has a mixture of sorceries and instants. We'll skip this. When you start the game, you always draw 7 cards. And these cards over here are extremely important, so I will explain these right now. These cards are your mana, or your land. So basic land, mountain. There are 5 colors in Magic. Red, green, blue, white, and black. This is a red. Mountains are red. And mana is what lets you play cards out of your hand. You can see on this card it has a name, and it has a mana cost in the upper right. This mana cost is 2 red. So to play this card, we will need at least 2 mountains on the field. You can see this card has a 1 and a red. So you need at least 1 red mountain and 1 any color. This could be a 1, a 2, a 3, and so on. It just means any color of mana. It doesn't have to be red. See, here's a 3. So this is a 1 red and then 3 any other color. So in total it's 4 mana. You can see on the card, it has a description here. On lands, it's just a picture. But on other cards, you can see this is where like the guts of the card is, what it actually does. There's always a card type here. In this case, it is a creature card. And then the creature is an elemental warrior. Some card effects will change depending on what type of creature it is. You can see this creature is a phoenix. Over here is the set it's from. In this case, it's Duels 13. So Magic 13. And it is silver for an uncommon card. Black is common. Gold is rare. And then like a purpley, goldish foil color is a mythic rare. Those don't really matter in Duels 13. Going back to land. Actually, let's go back to the opening hand. Here you can see that we get to play first. And we can either keep this hand or draw a new hand. This is a pretty good hand, so I'll end up keeping it. I know it's good because it has a bunch of small cards and at least a couple of creatures. So on my second turn, I can play this card. I can do 3 damage to something, so later on I'll explain damage and what this actually means, but for now just think of it as a card that can destroy my opponent's creatures. And I have another creature that is a game-winning card. I'll explain why it is a game-winning card later on. If you draw a new hand, you get 7 cards again, but then after that, you get no more freebies. So you lose 1 card for all of the successive hands after that. So I draw a new hand, I'd get 7 cards. If I chose to draw a new hand after that, I'd do 6. If I drew another hand after that, I'd get 5, and so on. Generally, you only want to do this once or twice, because getting less than 6 cards in your opening hand means that you're a huge disadvantage to your opponent. I will keep this hand, and now I'll open my turn by playing this. That is my land, and you get 1 land per turn. So you can only play 1 land per turn. Since I only have 1 mountain, and all of my cards cost at least 2, I can no longer do anything this turn. So it will eventually go to his turn. You can see down here in the bottom left are the phases of the game. You have an upkeep, which happens before you play any cards, and before you draw. Then you have a draw phase, then you have a main phase, where you can play cards. In my main phase, I played that mountain. Then there's a combat phase. And combat phase is when creatures attack, block, and do damage. And then you have a second main phase. So you get a main phase, a combat phase, and a main phase. During your second main phase, you can also play cards. And your end phase doesn't really matter, it just means you're swapping turns to your opponent's turn. If any of your cards say at the end of turn it has an ability and it does this, then during the end phase is when it will happen. I'll pass my turn to him and then explain the parts of the field or the battlefield. Where cards go when you play them, this area is the battlefield. So this is where land, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, auras, and I think that's it. That's where those cards go. This over here and up here are the libraries. Libraries are simply where your cards are. You can see I have 60 cards in my library. He has 53 cards in his library. That's kind of odd. He should have more than 53, I would think. You have your hand, which is this. Your hand holds your cards that you're ready to play. You can only have 7 cards in your hand by the end of the end step. So if you have more than 7 cards by the end of the end step, you have to discard cards until you have 7 at the most. You can see right here, it says I have 6 and he has 5. Usually you can look at hands to say, like, if he has a couple of cards in his hands, maybe he has a trick or two up his sleeve, but that's more advanced play, you don't have to worry about that. Below your library is where cards go to the graveyard. The graveyard are cards that have died or have already been played. Now I'll continue to explain card types. There are lands, right here. There are creatures. Creatures and lands can only be played during your main phases, unless the creature says otherwise on the card. Instants are special cards that you can play whenever you want or during any phase in response to something that goes on the stack. I'll explain the stack later, but for now you don't have to worry about it. There are cards that are like instants called sorceries. I'll see if I have one. No, I don't. Sorceries are cards that can only be played during your turn, and they can only be played during the main phase. There are enchantments, which stay on the battlefield, but they're not creatures, and they can do a variety of effects. Some can enchant a creature and do something unique to that creature. Some just give a global effect. In this case, you can see that he played a card, and then it started sparkling. Now, the reason it's sparkling, and I can stop the game here, is because whenever you make a play, it goes on the stack. The stack you can think of as like a pile of cards, if you actually had cards in the physical form. He would play a card, and then if I had mana open, I could say in response, I could play an instant. So the stack is always first in, last out. He would play a card, then I would play a card in response, and then say he played another card in response to that. That third card he played would happen first. Its effect would resolve first. Then my card would resolve, and then finally his creature would come out onto the field. Now the reason this matters is that, say he has a creature who will die if I play a card, but then he has a card that will keep it alive. Now if I cast my card on his creature that will kill it, and then he plays his card that makes it invincible, his invincibility effect would resolve first before my destroy effect. So my destroy effect wouldn't actually do anything. Now, if he played the card again, but in a different order, so he played the creature, and then he tried to make it invincible, but in response to him trying to make it invincible, I destroyed it. My destroy effect would resolve before the card became invincible, so it would be destroyed. So, card order matters. Whatever you play last happens first. Now, I'll explain what these do on the creature. You can ignore the effects for now, because creatures can have a variety of effects. And these effects, it's best just to click on more info, or look up a Magic the Gathering glossary to see what exactly they do. In this case, you can see haste means that creatures with haste ignore summoning sickness. They can attack and tap. They can attack, and their tapping abilities can be played as soon as they enter the battlefield. So, you don't exactly know what tapping means yet, but I'll explain it later. Don't have to worry about it. Here, these numbers in the bottom right are the power, the first number, and toughness, the second number. This creature has a power of 1 and a toughness of 1. Power can basically be thought of as what it will attack with, how much damage it will do when it attacks. And toughness is how strong it is, how durable it is. If I did 1 damage to this creature, since it only has 1 life, its life total will be brought to 0. Whenever a creature's life is brought to 0, it is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. If it had a toughness of 2, and I did 1 damage to it, then it would not be destroyed, because it would still have 1 life remaining. Damage lasts until the end of turn. So whenever a creature gets damaged, you don't have to worry about that damage until the end of the turn. Here, he played a Soul Warden for 1 white mana. It's a human cleric, we don't have to worry about that. But you can see its effect is, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, so whenever another creature is played, you gain 1 life. You always refers to the controller of the card. In that case, it is my opponent, Ajani, who is the controller. Your life totals are right here. He has 20 life right now, and I have 20 life. So if I played a creature, he would gain 1 life, so it would go up to 21. You'll see that'll happen on my next turn. However, that brings me to how do you win or lose the game? The way to win the game is simply to have a card that says you win the game on it. There aren't that many, so that's usually not how you win. The other way to win is if all of your opponents in the game lose. So how do you lose the game? How do you make an opponent lose the game? Well, when your life total reaches 0, you lose the game. When you have no cards in your deck anymore, and then you try to draw another card, so you have 0 cards in your library, and you try to draw, and there's no more cards in your library, it means you lose the game. Those are the two, what usually happen, the 2 usual ways to lose the game. I'll now continue playing. So now it is my turn. You saw that I just drew a card. At the beginning of your draw phase, which is between the main and upkeep, you draw a card. I'll play my 1 land for the turn, and then I'll play this creature. He gains 1 life. See how his effect just resolved after I played my creature? That's called a triggered effect. I played something that triggered an effect on his side of the field, and in response he gained 1 life. Now usually when you play a creature, it has Summoning Sickness. In this game, Summoning Sickness is a swirl. Summoning Sickness means that a creature cannot attack or tap on that turn. Tapping is this. You can see how my mana turned on its side? That is tapping. Whenever you want to use an effect, then usually you'll have to tap. However, this effect down here, Pyre Charger gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Whoops. Pirate Charger gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Does not have to tap. You simply have to pay 1 mana for that ability to go off. Now what this ability actually does, +1/+0, will just give it 1 extra attack, so it will be a 2/1 until end of turn. And you can keep doing that as many times as you want, as long as you have mana open. Tapped mana is used mana, so you can no longer use this mana until your next turn when everything untaps. It is currently attack phase, and I want this thing dead, so I'll attack. This can attack on the turn I summoned it because it has haste. That's the ability I read earlier. I'll attack, and after I attack, it's now block phase. During block phase, your opponent gets to choose what creature blocks an attacker. When you attack as a player, you attack another player. You don't attack creatures directly. So you can see an arrow pointing to a Johnny. I chose to attack, and it went to block phase. He chose not to block. The reason he chose not to block is because these creatures would have killed each other. Because my creature would have done 1 damage to his creature's toughness, and his creature would have done 1 damage to my creature's toughness. Meaning they both would have died, because both of their toughnesses would drop to 0 for that turn. Now you see he chose not to block, which means during combat damage phase, he takes 1 damage, and then my turn is over. You saw right there, his mana untapped. You always untap the first thing for each turn. Now he attacked me, and this creature is tapped. Because this creature is tapped, I cannot block with it. You can only block with untapped creatures. Meaning, if your creature attacks, then it can no longer block. So you have to choose when to attack and when you want to not attack to keep it up for next turn to block. I'll take 1 damage from his Soul Warden because I have no blockers. And now during his second main phase, he plays this card, the Lone Missionary, for 1 white and 1 mana of any color. And you can see when it enters the battlefield, he gains 4 life. His deck is all about gaining life quickly. And you can see this creature's power is 2 and its toughness is 1. It will deal 2 damage whenever it attacks, but its toughness is still 1. Meaning if these creatures attacked each other, this would still die and it would kill this. When you block a creature, it no longer attacks you directly. It does damage to your creature and your creature does damage to him. Now I will continue my turn, and I will attack. I want to attack because I want to kill this enemy creature, so hopefully he'll trade. You can see here that he is choosing to trade his 2/1 with my 1/1. You'll see what happens after combat damage phase. Now what happened there was that my 1/1 did 1 damage to his 2/1. So his toughness, his 1 toughness dropped to 0, and he did 2 damage to my 1/1, and my toughness dropped to -1. Because -1 is less than 0, they both died. Now during my second main phase, I can play another creature, but I'll choose not to display something on his turn. He chose to attack me. In response to him attacking me, I'll stop the timer and say, I will play this card, Searing Spear. It will deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So I'll play the card in response to him attacking on a creature, and I will target his Soul Warden. This effect resolves, and his attack is negated. He no longer has a creature there to attack me, so his attack is completely negated. Now I'll play my 4/1 flying card. Again, flying is another special ability, so we'll click more info. You can see flying means creatures with flying can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So this creature is unblockable unless he has flying or reach. You can see this has an additional effect where I can return it from my graveyard to my hand. So I'll continue the game and then attack him. I think at this point I have covered all of the basics. So, oh, he played a creature with flying, so he can block my flyer, and he gains 2 life. But at this point, I've covered all the basics. So after he attacks or I attack him, I'll probably end the game. I suppose I'll explain something else real quick though, just so you understand comic phase better. I'll choose to attack, and then normally right here, if you did not want him to block, you would play this and destroy it. The reason you want to destroy an enemy creature before he chooses to block is because once a creature is blocked, even if that creature is destroyed, the creature is blocked, so it won't deal damage to him. To explain that, I'll continue. Oh, he chose not to block. That's interesting. I actually wanted him to block there to explain something. For certain effects like this, it's best just to read the card or the glossary, but the basic idea of the game is over, so I'll end the video here. Thanks for watching. I hope you can learn to play the game yourself sometime. Bye-bye.